I'd like to welcome you guys to Destination Community Church. Thank you so much for being with us today. I don't know today if I'm really rusty or if I'm rested or what it is, but I've had 3 weeks off, which is kind of abnormal, and it feels really, really good to be back up here. Doing 3 services after a little while kind of starts to give a little wear and tear, so to be able to have other pastors here to give a break is a really, really amazing blessing, and I'm so grateful for what they're able to do and the fact that you don't have to listen to me all the time. One thing that I do want to remind you guys of, I know that you've seen some stuff about it, at least most of you have on social media, is that starting next week, and this will be mentioned in our announcements as well, we are going to be starting a 4-week series on mental illness called Troubled Minds. And what I would like to recommend, obviously, is for you to be here, but if you have friends or family members that struggle with depression, anxiety, maybe a form of mental illness that's a little bit more severe, definitely invite them here, because I think the church is one area that should be talking about this stuff that is often neglecting to talk about it. It's one of 2 or 3 what we could call elephants in the room. They just aren't being discussed enough, and this is the place that we should be talking about it. We are going to be talking about it. You'll have some invite cards that you can give people as they leave today. And when I say that, I don't mean for you to take the invite cards and if you think your friends got real problems, like, here, you need this, or anything like that. But really give it to anybody that you would like, that you feel like, needs to be aware of how the church should view this. It's going to be a wonderful time. Today we are in week 10, the last week of a 10-week series on the parables of Jesus called The Conversationalist. We call this series The Conversationalist because Jesus had a very special way of relating to an audience. What we've talked about over the last 10 weeks is that Jesus spoke in parables, which were these relatable stories that were then followed up with moral lessons that he was able to offer in that time. Because he did this so successfully, we call him the great conversationalist. Now, I can't tell you what the most joyful or what the most happy parable in the Bible is. If I had to say for myself, I would probably say the prodigal son that Pastor Lee talked about last week, as well as the week before that. I think when I think about the son coming home, for me, that probably brings about the most joy and the most happiness. But I can tell you what I consider to be the scariest parable and the most subversive and kind of dangerous parable, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. And this is the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. All right, so some of you probably recognize, if you've been at church here long enough or you know enough about me as a pastor, is that I don't really talk about hell a whole lot. All right, and it's not because I don't believe in hell or anything like that. I definitely believe in the reality of hell. It's just that I don't believe that a discussion about hell, or especially hearing hell every single week, is the best motivator for people to learn what it means to follow Jesus. I grew up in an environment that was probably a lot like the environments that some of you grew up in if you went to church, and literally it felt like almost every sermon or every message, regardless of how it got started, I mean, it could get started in the Song of Solomon's, and then all of a sudden it turns into a message about hell. And there is all this guilt, and there's all this condemnation. And I also think about whenever we talk about the reality of hell, that we should talk about it with compassion, because it's something that we really care about. But in some of your experiences, it appeared that the pastor was just getting more angry and louder whenever they talked about hell. I've been in many environments where I feel like hell has been used in a really manipulative way that I don't really care much for, and I think that's a problem as well. And what I mean by that, and Beth and I both, we grew up in a church where people were making salvation decisions literally every single week, but it was like the same people. So in other words, whenever you have like this trigger of emotions that kind of starts to set in, whenever you get scared or worried about the thought of hell, literally the same people were getting saved over and over and over again, but they were never really taught what it looked like to practically follow Jesus in this world. Really what they understood was, that's the bad place, this is the good place, I don't want to go there, I do want to go here. So that's really about as far as it goes, and then they just kind of live their lives, however they live their lives. Maybe they go to church a lot, maybe they don't go to church, but they're always kind of able to hang on to this time or hang on this date whenever they made a profession of faith, so then they feel as if they're not going to hell. So I believe that this idea of a fear of hell often doesn't motivate or produce the best results in what it means to actually follow Jesus. Like many of you, I had a very strong education with this growing up, and I would not understand the love of God and what that really meant, and what it meant to be transformed and changed. And despite the fact that I had the issues that I had, that I could completely step into this new life, that I could completely have this new journey because God's love was so strong for me. And I realized that I could really walk out of that condemnation and that fear and that guilt that I grew up with that was so strong. So today I want to talk about hell because Jesus talks about hell. Now, Jesus doesn't talk about hell a lot, but he definitely talks about it. So I just want to clear up a few questions really quickly so that you understand the personal theology of your pastor. Do I believe in hell? Yes. I believe in hell as much as I believe in heaven or any concept or any idea about the afterlife. Yes, I believe in hell. What do I believe that hell is? I believe that hell is eternal separation from God. Now, there are a lot of other things that we could actually say about hell, but to be on the safe side right now, that's where I'm going to leave this, because I can promise you that separation from God is the worst possible thing that you can imagine. All right? Do I believe that hell overall is discussed responsibly in churches with deep investigation on the subject matter? In my experience, no, it hasn't been. In fact, like I said, whenever a message starts a certain way and then all of a sudden we get on the topic of hell, people seem angry. And what I heard when I was growing up, a lot of different things like this, it would even be a message, well, if I could open up the floor right here and you could see everyone suffering and tormenting, every person in here would come forward. Well, of course they would. That would be pretty freaky to see. I think we would all agree about that. All right? But as far as the love of God and what that looks like and what the cross means and how that changes a person and the transformation, like the spiritual disciplines that we learn to be a disciple of Jesus, we didn't really get those things. Now, the problem with that is it produces a different kind of outcome. If the only reason that I'm going to church or the only reason that I say that I'm following Jesus or whatever is because of a fear of hell, that doesn't really produce anything real. It's kind of a false sense of security that it's producing within me. All right, so as far as my views, that's kind of where I stand on some of that stuff. Now, prior to the text that we're going to look at this morning, and we're going to look at Luke chapter 16, parable of the rich man and Lazarus. Prior to this text, Jesus is talking about dishonesty, the love of money, and bad reasons for divorce. All right, so prior to what we're going to look at today, this is what Jesus is talking about. And then he goes in. This is definitely a parable about wealth. All right, this is a parable about wealth and wealth mismanagement even more than it's a parable about hell. All right, but this is what Jesus says. Once there was a rich man who used to dress in purple, purple being the color of royalty, and fine linen, and live in great luxury every day. And then there's this beggar named Lazarus. So this is when our second character is introduced into the parable. This beggar named Lazarus, who was covered with sores, and he was brought to his gate. And we need to understand the destitution also of Lazarus and his poverty. He was always trying to satisfy his hunger with what fell from the rich man's table. So he's living completely at the mercy of the rich man, even though the rich man wants very little to do with him. Even the dogs used to come and lick his sores. One day the beggar died and was carried away by the angels to Abraham's side. This is an analogy of heaven. All right, so this is where the beggar goes. This is where this guy named Lazarus goes. Now, the rich man also dies and is buried. So the two characters that we have, the rich man and Lazarus, both die. Lazarus goes to heaven, and then we see that the rich man is buried in the afterlife where he was in constant torment. He looked up and saw Abraham far away and Lazarus by his side. So he shouted, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me." It's funny, he waits until he's in this actual state or he's in this actual place to actually cry out for mercy. Send Lazarus, keep in mind that this is the beggar that he wants nothing to do with. Send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water to cool off my tongue, because I am suffering in this fire. But Abraham said, my child, remember that during your lifetime you received hardships, but now he is being comforted here while you suffer. Besides all this, a wide chasm has been fixed between us, so that those who want to cross from this side to you cannot do so, nor can they cross from your side to us. The rich man said, then I beg you. See, the rich man at this point, he understands he has no hope. He's in hell. That's where he is. This is what eternity looks like. But the rich man said, then I beg you, Father, send Lazarus to my father's house, because I have 5 brothers, to warn them so that they won't end up in this place of torture too. So there's nothing that can be done for me, but maybe, hopefully, there is mercy for my brothers who are still alive. Abraham said, they have Moses and the prophets. They should listen to them. But the rich man replied, no, Father Abraham, but if someone from the dead went to them, they would repent. They would recognize their ways. They would not fall and continue to fall into the mistakes that I have made, but they would actually turn everything over. Then Abraham told him, if your brothers do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be persuaded, even if someone were to rise from the dead. This is a scary and very real warning that we have to talk about if we are the church. So there are 3 things that I want you to see this morning that we can say for certain about hell. There are a lot of other things that we could possibly say with speculation, but there are 3 things that we can say for certain about this place that a lot of people are going to spend their eternity. And the first thing is this: people in hell have an awareness of the God they've rejected. All right, they have an awareness of what's going on while they are there. Verse 23 says, in the afterlife, where he was in constant torment, this is talking about the rich man, he looked up and saw Abraham and Lazarus by his side. Later we'll notice that the rich man actually calls Lazarus by name. So we can say that we recognize that there is this form of awareness that is actually there. And I don't think that we should view this as a literal vision. All right, this is not a literal vision going on, meaning the rich man is way down here, if you even figuratively want to look at like up and down. But if the rich man is down here and he's looking up and he's looking at Lazarus, this is not a literal thing going on. It's a cognitive thing that is going on. So what this means that is while the rich man is actually in hell, he has the ability to think. He has the ability to process. He has the ability to think about his decisions and maybe how he would have done things differently if he had the opportunity now to do some things differently. Now, this is a very painful thought, all right? But I want you to travel with me just for a minute. This is a very painful thought because I believe that right now there are people in our previous service, in this service, and in the service that we're going to have after this that could spend eternity in hell, that could be a reality. And I believe that the people definitely that are in here today, but also that are in here on a pretty regular basis, or maybe have went to other churches or have had friends talk to them, or whatever that might look like, they have had the opportunity to respond to the gospel in one way or another. And I can promise you that as you're here today, you are going to have the opportunity to respond to Jesus and to say yes to Jesus. But I believe that with this cognitive ability and with this awareness that people experience in this, that what some people possibly in this room right now are going to see is this very moment and the opportunity that they know that they had to make things right in their heart and in their lives. I think that you guys know me well enough. If you've been here enough, if it's your first time here, you might be freaked out. This is not the norm, all right? Billy Ray's might taste a little different today, all right? But usually we're talking about the love of God, and we're going to get there because this is a beautiful, beautiful story when we get to the rest of it. But the reality is that when people make the decision to reject, and in some cases, reject over and over and over again, they feel that nudge in their heart. They feel that tug. And here's the scary thing. A lot of these people are church leaders. A lot of these people are people who grew up in church and can recite more of the Bible than someone like me. A lot of these people are upstanding members of the community that go to church every single week. A lot of these people are just really, really, really good people that are going to spend an eternity recognizing that something wasn't right within them, but that they made the decision to never do anything about it. And you see, there's also this belief that we can take care of it at a later date. This is what we always tell ourselves, especially when we're younger. Well, whenever we get married, whenever we have our own family, whenever we do this, whenever we do that, we're going to take care of that at some other point. The analogy that I got, I don't know if you guys did whenever I was a kid, but this is the way it was always explained. What if you got in your car tonight and had the wreck? That was the fear tactic with them. And every time I got in a car, I put on a seatbelt. I felt like, what else do I need? If I wreck, I'm going to go to hell. And, that's just the way that I looked at it because that was what was told me. Literally, that's how, by the way, we love you, And, but you're told, whenever you leave tonight, you could go to hell, and all that kind of thing. But the truth is that we have no promise. We have no promise of any kind of tomorrow whatsoever. And all of us have had people close enough. At all ages pass away, so we know that this reality is very true. All right, and make no mistake about it that with the rich man in this case, this has to do with his wealth. What Jesus is specifically talking about is wealth and wealth sustainability. So please keep in mind there are going to be observable consequences. There will be observable consequences for rejecting God. The next thing that I want you to notice, and I already kind of hit on this a little bit, is that hell is separation from God. And you think to yourself, well, that doesn't even really necessarily sound that bad. I can promise you it's very bad. We could talk about this world. Well, let me show you the passage first whenever this is discussed. This is verse 26. Besides all this, a wide chasm has been fixed between us so that those who want to cross from this side to you cannot do so, nor can they cross from your side to us. So there is this chasm or this place that you simply can't get to the other side, as much as the rich man wants to experience this for himself. All right? So commentaries over and over again are suggesting that this is an allegorical meaning. There's not an actual debate, like a literal debate that's going on right here. But what's described here is a dramatic view of a horrible experience. So again, I think a lot of times whenever we think about this world, and I think like with you guys yesterday about this horrible shooting, another shooting, 20 people in El Paso at a shopping center. And then Dayton this morning, when I'm looking at the news in Dayton this morning, 9 people. Dayton is very close to my heart. As some of you know, I went to seminary in Dayton. I absolutely love Dayton. And I see some of my friends checking in safe this morning to show that they weren't part of anything that happened. I think it was at a nightclub that was pretty late. A lot more people injured. There could be more people even at this point confirmed dead. Seems like an evil world that we live in. We have starvation. We have malnutrition. We have child abuse. We have war. We have disease. We have all of these global problems. But here's the thing. If the world is right here, all right, if this is the world, God still has his hand on this world despite everything that's going on. There is still love in this world. There is still compassion in this world. Redemption through the cross is still possible in this world. But do you want to know what hell is? Hell is when you take this world and you completely remove this hand. And you think you've seen hell on earth. You think that you've seen problems. You think that you've seen destruction and political corruption and all these problems. We haven't seen anything. because God's hand is still on this world. So what hell is actual complete separation from God. So the Bible talks about a lake of fire and torment and all of these physical things that could happen if you're in hell. But I'm going to make you a promise. None of this even begins to compare to what a world would be like that is completely separated from God. Very simply put, this word chasm, what this means, it's a separation between heaven and hell, God and Satan, good and evil, a complete separation. And because of his wealth, the rich man, and it's something else for each of us, but because of his wealth, the rich man was completely ignorant of the needs that Lazarus has. And you see, there are all these things that we tell ourselves, I'll wait till tomorrow. It's stubbornness, it's comfort, it's fear, it's, I'll procrastinate, whatever it may be. And this is how we deal with it. The last thing that I want you to see about this reality of hell is that people who are actually in hell would never wish this on anyone else. They would never, and I don't care if it's someone that's agnostic, I don't care if it's someone that's atheist, I don't care what the possible view might be. No one would wish this experience on anyone else. Verses 27 and 28 say this, whenever the rich man recognizes there is nothing else that can be done for me, he says, then I beg you, Father, send Lazarus to my father's house, because I have 5 brothers, to warn them so that they won't end up in this place of torture too. Okay, so 2 things that we can definitely say with certainty. No one that goes to hell wants to stay there. All right? No one who goes to hell wants to stay there. But also, no one that goes to hell would do life the same way again. And what this means, and this is the beauty of the story, is that you have the opportunity to respond today. You have the opportunity to make things right. You have the opportunity to be reconciled to God. That is something much more than church attendance. That's something more than a sappy Facebook post. That's something more than, well, I'm trying to do more good than the bad that I do. You have the opportunity to make things right. Now, as I pause this for just a second, I have to say this. It is not my intention, as some of you know me very well, it is not my intention to tell you this stuff today to scare you. Especially if you're in here with your 5-year-old. That's why we have a kids ministry. I don't want to go to hell. All right? I am not saying this to scare you. It's not my style. I think it's manipulative. I think it's cheap. And my personal opinion is it's not going to give you the best results as far as what it means to follow Jesus. Again, not taking away from its reality, but you must be prompted and you must be moved by what God did for you. And that's what you've got to recognize. Again, I said I didn't recognize this until I had been a Christian for today is August the 4th. I've been a Christian for 22 years today. And in those 22 years, there were a good several years there at the beginning that I had no understanding of the fact that despite the fact that I was an alcoholic, despite the fact that I had issues with fear and anxiety and depression, despite how I treated other people, despite the selfishness and going my way over and over again, that God really did love me. That He really wasn't in the air just seeking to hit me over the head with a hammer all the time, every single time that I messed up. And what motivated me to turn my life over, what motivated me to change, was not a fear of hell, but was the goodness of God. Was that love that pours out to me every single day that is like nothing else I have ever experienced in this world. And it gives me a motivation to get more and more and more of that every single day. Is there suffering? Yes. Do I go through seasons when I have no understanding of what's going on in my life? I'm in the middle of one of those right now, but He is faithful. He is just. He has always taken care of me, and I simply can't get enough of it. That's what moves me. Let's turn around and look at the other side of this for just a second. Hell is a scary place. Nobody really wants to go there. The alternative is heaven. But why in the world would you ever enjoy going to a place like heaven if you don't enjoy following Jesus here? I mean, I think you'd kind of just like to stay here if that were your alternative, so that you could have the life here. All right, because you know that you don't want to go to a place of eternal torment. You know that you don't want to go to a place of separation from God. You know you don't want to go to a place where that awareness is always there. You know that if you're there, you would never want anybody else to go there. But the truth is, most of you really don't want to go to heaven either. And I think that's the reality that's so difficult for us, because we've been taught hell, 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 but not as much Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. This is the practical life. It's all about the blood. Do you understand that? Do you understand what it means to take the bad things out in your life right now? My anger, my impatience, to remove those things, to prune me, to purify me, to make me more like Jesus. And oh my goodness, that feels so good. It's so amazing. Not I, but Christ who lives in me every day. This is what it's about. Yet we have this heaven-hell dichotomy that's so weird. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, all right? But application today, what does all this mean? Following Jesus, or saying that you're a Christian, or whatever you want to call it, must be viewed as more than hell avoidance, all right? I just know for certain that I don't want to go there. I just know for certain. So I prayed that prayer when I was 12 years old. I prayed that prayer when I was 15 years old. I was baptized when I was 30. I was baptized as an infant. Whatever that might look like, but I'm not actually willing to turn things over. Why couldn't the rich man? I love my stuff. I love my way. And I'm just not willing to believe that there is something better than that. I'm going to be completely honest with you, I never even think about hell, because following Jesus is so good. I have friends, family members, people that I care about that I do not want to see go to hell, but that is the extent throughout my thought process, because I am focused on the goodness of God. Our most important goal with this whole thing, with this whole conversation, should actually be to get the hell out of us. All right? So we're constantly talking about trying to stay out of hell, but the idea, the objective is to get the hell out of me. I used to hear an old Baptist pastor, he said it this way, say, people just want fire insurance. They want enough Jesus to keep them out of hell, but not enough Jesus to get the hell out of them. Is that not true? That's what they want. They know that there's this place that they don't want to go, but they have no desire to repent. They have no desire to see these changes in their lives. And I wish I could express how beautiful this actually is. So in the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, Jesus is addressing the sin of the rich man. He's addressing his greed. He is addressing his indifference to this man that's at his gate every day begging for crumbs. He is looking at his selfishness in his life. And as I consider the problems that I have right now in my life, it's this purification process where he's constantly working to get the hell out of me at all times. So what is it that we need to understand? Jesus is sharing this so that hell can be avoided. There is no doubt about that. Jesus is sharing this so that people are not going to go to hell. But more importantly, it's so that the abundant life can be experienced. It's not so that you can simply not go to this place and suffer forever. It's so that you can understand your true identity and why you are here. There is more to your life than your work. There is more to your life than your spouse. There is more to your life than your kids. There is more to your life than the struggles you're going to your life. And there is more to your life than Netflix. There is more to your life than these things. It's this life that you're supposed to live. And until you start getting the hell out of you, I'm trying to be very careful not to curse, all right, the way that I'm going with these sentences. But to get the hell out of you is the purpose. And this is what we are constantly working for. So for some of you that didn't grow up in church and you have no idea what I'm talking about, as this alternative, we can consider this special verse. And the problem is that this verse is so common that for some of you that grew up in church, it's completely lost its meaning. And that's a real shame when this verse loses its meaning. It's like my wife telling me to take the trash out. It's lost its meaning at this point. All right? For God so loved the world that He gave His one and only Son, that whoever believes in Him shall not perish, shall not go to a place like hell, but have everlasting life, have eternal life, have abundant life in the here and now and in the next life. You see, what this should actually feel like whenever we step into heaven is, other than the fact that we have new bodies and that we're in the presence of Jesus, it should literally just feel like a step into the next realm. That's how close we should walk with Jesus in this world. Have you been redeemed? Have you been changed? And you say, well, of course I did. I filled out the clipboard and the church membership and got all that taken care of. I serve and I give. I prayed a prayer at one point. But I want us to consider what this word believes actually means. Because I believe that if I pay my water bill, I'm going to continue to have water. I believe that if I put the key in the ignition of my car, that my car is going to start. But that is not what we're talking about here, and that's what most people in the church believe we're talking about. They say, well, yes, I believe in Jesus. Of course I do. But that doesn't actually change the way I do my life. So what belief in the Greek, pistis, what this means, it's an active verb. This is my version of John 3:16, and please don't keep it for yourself. It's not a good translation. The person who turns their life over to Jesus, possessions, decisions, finances, property, everything that you have, I am all yours. This is what it means to believe in the New Testament. It's not simply an intellectual acknowledgement. Okay, sure, I believe in Jesus, just like I believe in so many other things. It is, you now have me, I belong to you, I'm done with what I previously was. And when we do this, we will experience the true meaning of life. It's rugged, it's dirty, it's nasty, and it is amazing. It is beautiful in every sense of the word. So the question is, where are you today? And as some of your hearts are racing and your palms are sweaty and you want to get out of here and you want to go wherever it is that you need to go, I'm just asking you to think. Have you had a real moment with Jesus that has completely rocked your world and changed everything? Or do you see yourself as a somewhat casual religious person that could look at a trail of events, this chronological timeline of your life, in which you've always essentially been the same person? With all heads bowed this morning and all eyes closed,